Good morning. Welcome to Christ Table. My name is Kevin Young. I have the privilege of serving at Christ Table as lead clergy. If you'd like to know more about Christ Table, super simple. www.christstable.today. Sign up for our email list there so that you'll know everything that's going on around Christ Table. If you'd like to know more about this study in particular, the URL right there in front of me, go.christstable.today/divinecomedy. Took me a moment. Divine Comedy, that's where you're going to find more information about this study. In particular, there is a PDF study guide there that we'd love to give to you. It's absolutely free, no strings attached. You don't have to put in your email address or anything. That will help you walk through each day of the study. That will give you some cultural context from the first century to help you understand everything that's going on here with Jesus' sometimes odd, but sometimes very clear humor. And if you'd like to get that PDF in a printed form, we have those available as well. You can get these nice spiral bound books, workbooks that go along with the study. All you have to do on that URL right there is hit the button that says get the box. And we have a box of materials that we send you along with that study to help you navigate through this series. One other thing that I want to make sure that you're aware of, if you don't already know, this book, Reconstruct Your Faith. If you're disillusioned, discouraged, done with the church, know somebody who is. This book is a phenomenal resource. drkevinyoung.com. Find out more information about that and where you can acquire it from. So we're working through this series called Divine Comedy, where for 28 days, 7 weeks, 7 weeks, 4 times a week, we're looking at all of these places in Scripture where Jesus utilizes wit, sarcasm, awkward situations, or humorous stories, or surprising turns or twists in order to communicate what he was trying to communicate as a part of the lesson that he was trying to get across. And there's a lot of comedy in what Jesus does, but a lot of it is lost in translation. So today we find ourselves in one of those awkward moments that would have had the crowd around Jesus laughing, but the person who are in the crosshairs, probably not so much. Authority or anger. Matthew chapter 21, verses 23 to 27. One of the things that I have realized over the years is that there are certain people who you just don't tangle with because they may not be smarter than you or wiser than you, but they are sharper than you. They have the ability to put you in your place, oftentimes tactfully, sometimes not so tactfully, and it's just best to give them a wide berth, to not tangle or try to prove anything, because you're gonna lose every time you try to prove it. Jesus was kind of one of those individuals where you didn't necessarily want to cross or mess with Jesus or give him a hard time, because he had the ability to tactfully put you in your place. But it wasn't just that he was out of line. He was smarter and wiser than them and had a very clear opportunity to bring things to a very fine point in a way that was both very memorable and very sharp. You would feel it, not just hear it. Several folks, the Pharisees, whom we have regularly said were not really the bad guys in the story, were there Pharisees who were bad guys? There probably were. I mean, on the basis of Scripture, all of them were. In fact, some of the best people in the New Testament are Pharisees. Some of the most helpful people to Jesus were Pharisees. So they kind of get a bad rap. But, one of the things that we recognize is religious leaders are held to a higher standard. They should be today. And Jesus certainly expected them to hold themselves to a higher standard back then as well. So when we come to today's passage in Matthew chapter 1, verses 23, it's early. Sorry, verses 23 through 27, there's going to be a tangle. So when Jesus returned to the temple and began teaching, the leading priests and elders came up to him and demanded this answer. There was a lot of tension there between Jesus and them. They didn't like the things that Jesus was teaching or the things that Jesus was doing. It was kind of pulling attention away from them and sometimes the things that they said. So they demanded, by what authority are you doing all of these things, all of these commands that you're giving, all these miracles that you're doing? By what authority are you doing all of this? Who gives you the right? Jesus says, I'll tell you by what authority I do these things. If you answer this one question, did John's authority to baptize come from heaven, or was it merely human? Now, there is so much wrapped up in this because there is a catch-22 in this question of where John's authority came from. Because if they admit that John's authority to baptize comes from God, not from them, not through the proper channels, then it validates Jesus. So if they admit that John's authority to baptize came from God, not from them, then they have to admit that God could have done the same with Jesus. They can't do that. But if they say that John's authority to baptize didn't come from God, that it was human, then they're going to anger everybody in the crowd around them, because everybody in the crowd around them, John is a hero. John was seen to them as being a prophet of the Old Testament, and it would anger the crowd, and they would rise up and revolt and probably remove all those folks from leadership. So this is like a catch-22 for them. They can't answer this question, and Jesus has put them in a pickle, and he knows it, because they don't think that God's authority is on Jesus, but they have to admit that they weren't involved in God giving authority to John, which means that they also would have to admit that Jesus could have authority that didn't come from them and yet was still allowed. What Jesus has done here is he's given them an impossible dilemma. There's this meme graphic that's gone around for years called Thug Life, where somebody does something like this that's just completely and utterly just boss level, and just does something just far beyond. And then there's this little music that plays and the sunglasses goes on the person. This is essentially what Jesus is kind of boss level these guys, because the religious leaders are trapped here. They can't admit that John's authority came from God, which they all probably believed, because that would validate Jesus. But they also couldn't say that it didn't come from God, because the people knew better. It would have angered all the folks who were in the crowds there, who adored John, and rightfully so. So Jesus is kind of throwing this gauntlet. I'll tell you by whose authority I do things if you'll tell me by what authority John did things. So they pull away from the crowd and they start whispering among themselves. If we say it was from heaven, he's going to ask us why we didn't believe John. But if we say it was merely human, then we'll be mobbed, because the people believe that John was a prophet. So they look up from their circled wagons here, and in front of all of the crowd, they say, we don't know. Which is probably the best answer, because not only now have they proven to Jesus that they've been caught and trapped in a double standard here, but they also have proven themselves. And the crowd knew. The crowd knew this dilemma that they were in as well. And so by saying we don't know, now they're the laughing stock of the people who don't have the guts to say what they really think, because they're scared of either God and John, or they're scared of the people. Jesus responded, well, if you're not going to tell me by what authority John did his things, then I'm not going to tell you by what authority I do my things. So get lost. I have to think that Jesus was chuckling whenever he delivered that line. But I'm not going to tell you either. Smirk. The mouth goes up just a little bit on one side as Jesus is trying to stifle a laughter at them being so easily trapped by their own theology and thinking. And I'm guessing the disciples behind him, we know that Peter would not have stifled a laugh. Probably several other of the disciples are snickering. They're probably like bent over, hunched over behind Jesus, like trying to keep it down so that nobody can see that they're laughing. And this is what happens when you try to say that things that are of God are not of God, or when you try to place your own authority over the authority of others for the wrong reasons. That's all the time that we have for today. Look forward to being back with you tomorrow as we continue on our journey through Divine Comedy. But until that time, make sure that you visit go.christstable.today/divine comedy for those resources.